sun's come up over 1,000 times. Summers and winters have cracked the mountains a little bit more, and the rains have brought down some of the dirt. Some babies that weren't even born before have begun talking regular sentences already. And some people who thought they were right young and spry have noticed they can't bound up a flight of stairs like they used to without their hearts fluttering a little. All that can happen in 1,000 days. Nature's been pushing and contriving in other ways too. A number of young people fell in love and got married. Yes, the mountain got bit away more, a few fractions of an inch. Millions of gallons of water went by the mill. And here and there, a new home was set up under a roof. Almost everybody in the world gets married. You know what I mean? In our town, there ain't hardly any exceptions. Most everybody in the world climbs into their graves married. Now, the first act was called daily life. This act is called love and marriage. There's another act coming after this. I reckon you can guess what that's about. So, it's 3 years later. It's 1904. It's July 7th, just after high school commencement. That's the time when most of our young people jump up and get married. As soon as they've passed their last examinations in solid geometry and Cicero's orations, looks like they feel themselves fit to be married. It's early morning, only this time it's been raining. It's been pouring and thundering. Mrs. Gibbs is garden, and Mrs. Webb's here, drenched. All those bean poles and pea vines, drenched. All yesterday over there on Main Street, the rain looked like curtains being blown along. It may begin again any minute. There, you can hear the 5:45 for Boston. And here come Mrs. Gibbs and Mrs. Webb, come down to make breakfast, just as though it were any ordinary day. I don't have to point out to the women in my audience, those ladies they see before them, both of them cook 3 meals a day. One of them for 20 years, and the other for 40, and no summer vacation. They brought up 2 children apiece, washed, cleaned the house, and never a nervous breakdown. It's like what one of those European poets said. You've got to love life to have life, but you've got to have life to love life. It's what they call the vicious circle.
Get up, Bessie.
And here comes Howie Newsom delivering the milk. And there's Cy Crowell delivering the paper, just like his brother before him.
Morning, Howie.
Morning, Cy. Anything in the paper I know?
Nothing much, except we're losing about the best baseball pitcher Grover's Corners had ever had, George Gibbs.
Reckon he is?
He could hit and run bases too.
Yep, mighty fine ball player. Whoa, Bessie. I guess I can stop and talk about mine too.
I don't see how I could give up such a thing like that just to get married. Would you, Howie?
Can't tell, Cy. Never had no talent that way. You're up early, Bill.
Seeing if there's anything I can do to prevent a flood. River's been rising all night.
Cy Crowell's all worked up here about George Gibbs retiring from baseball.
Yes, sir. That's the way it goes. Back in '84, we had a player side. Not even George Gibbs could touch him. Name of Hank Todd. Went up to Maine and became a parson. Wonderful ball player. Howie, how's the weather look to you?
Oh, tain't bad. Think maybe it'll clear up for good.
Good morning, Howie. You think it's going to rain again?
Morning, Mrs. Gibbs. It rained so heavy, I think it just might clear up.
Certainly hope it will.
How much did you want today?
I'm going to have a house full of relations, Howie. Looks to me like I'll need 3 of milk and 2 of cream.
My wife says to tell you they'll be very happy, Mrs. Gibbs. No, they will.
Thanks a lot, Howie. Tell your wife I hope she gets there to the wedding.
Yes, she'll get there. She'll get there if she can. Come on, Bessie. Good morning, Mrs. Webb.
Well, good morning, Mr. Newsom. I told you 4 quarts of milk, but I hope you can spare me another.
Yes, sir. And the 2 cream?
Will it start raining again, Mr. Newsom?
Well, I was just saying Mrs. Gibbs is how May lighten up. Mrs. Newsom told me to tell you, as I hope they'll both be very happy, Mrs. Webb. No, they will.
Thank you. And thank Mrs. Newsom. We're counting on seeing both of you at the wedding.
Yes, Mrs. Webb, we'll be there. Couldn't miss that. Come on, Bessie.
Well, Ma, today's the day. You're losing one of your chicks.
Oh, Frank Gibbs, don't you say another word. I feel like crying every minute. Sit down and drink your coffee.
The groom's up shaving himself. Only, there ain't an awful lot to shave. He's whistling and singing like he's glad to leave us. Every now and then he looks in the mirror and says, I do, but it don't sound convincing to me.
I declare, Frank, I don't know how they'll get along. I've arranged his clothes and seen to it he's put warm things on. Frank, they're too young. Emily won't think of such things. He'll catch his death of cold and die within a week.
I was remembering my wedding morning, Julia.
Now don't you start that, Frank Gibbs.
I was the scaredest young fella in the state of New Hampshire. I thought I'd make a mistake for sure. But when I saw you walking down that aisle, you were the prettiest girl I'd ever seen. The only problem was I had never seen you before. There I was in the Congregational Church, marrying a total stranger.
And how do you think I felt? Frank, weddings are perfectly awful things. Farces, that's what they are. Here, I've made you something.
Why, Julia Hersey, French toast!
Tain't hard to make, and I had to do something.
How'd you sleep last night, Julia?
Well, I heard a lot of the hours struck off.
Yes, I get a shock every time I think of George setting out to be a family man. The great dangling thing. I tell you, there's nothing so terrifying in the world as a son. The relationship between father and son is the darnest, awkwardest
Well,
thing.
mother and daughter ain't no picnic, let me tell ya.
They'll have their fair share of troubles, I suppose, but that's none of our business. Everybody has a right to their own troubles.
Yes. It ain't right to be lonesome. People are meant to go through life 2 by 2.
Julia, you know what I was scared of when I married you?
I'll go along with you.
I was afraid we wouldn't have material for conversation more than it'd last us a few weeks. I was afraid we'd run out and have to eat our meals in silence. That's a fact. Well, it's been 20 years now without any noticeable barren spells.
Well, good weather, bad weather. Tain't very choice, but I always find something to say. Have you heard Rebecca strewn around upstairs?
No. It's the only day of the year Rebecca isn't managing everybody's business up there. She's hiding in her room. I got the impression she's crying.
Lord's sake, this has got to stop. Rebecca, come downstairs and get your breakfast.
Good morning, everybody. Only 5 more hours to live.
George Gibbs, where are you going?
Just stepping across the grass to see my girl.
Now, George, you put on your overshoes. It's raining torrents. You don't go outside my house without prepared for it.
Oh, Ma, it's just a step.
George, you'll catch a cold and cough all through the service.
George, do as your mother tells you.
From tomorrow on, you can kill yourself in all weathers, but while you're in my house, you live wisely, thank you. Maybe Mrs. Webb isn't used to callers at 7 in the morning. Here, take a cup of coffee first.
Be back in a minute. Good morning, Mother Webb.
Oh, goodness, you frightened me, George. Now you can come in a minute out of the wet, but you know I can't ask you in.
Why not?
You know as well as I do, George. The groom can't see his bride on his wedding day, not until he sees her in church.
Oh, that's just superstition. Good morning, Mr. Webb.
Good morning, George.
Mr. Webb, you don't believe in superstition like that, do you?
Well, there's a lot of common sense in some superstitions, George.
Millions have followed it, George, and you don't want to be the first to fly in the face of custom.
How's Emily?
She hasn't waked up yet. I haven't heard a sound out of her.
Emily's asleep?
No wonder. We were up till all hours sewing and packing. Now I'll tell you what I'll do. You sit down here with Mr. Webb and drink this cup of coffee, and I'll go upstairs and see she doesn't come down and surprise you. There's some bacon too, but don't be long about it.
Mr. Webb, you don't think there's sense in superstition, do you?
Well, you see, on her wedding morning, a girl set out to be full of clothes and one thing and another. Don't you think that's probably it?
Yes, I never thought of that.
A girl's out to be a mite nervous on her wedding day.
I wish a fella could get married without all that marching up and down.
Every man that's ever lived has felt that way about it, George. But it hasn't been any use. It's the women folk who built up weddings, my boy. For a while now, the women have it all their own. A man looks pretty small at a wedding, George. All those good women standing shoulder to shoulder, making sure the knot's tied in a mighty public way.
But you believe in it, don't you, Mr. Webb?
Oh yes. Oh yes. Don't you misunderstand me, my boy. Marriage is a wonderful thing. Wonderful thing. And don't you forget that, George.
No, sir. Mr. Webb, how old were you when you got married?
Well, you see, I'd been to college, and I'd taken a little time to get settled. Now, Mrs. Webb, she wasn't much older than Emily was. Oh, age has nothing to do with it, George. Not compared with other things.
What were you going to say, Mr. Webb?
Oh, I don't know. Was I going to say something? George, I was thinking the other night of some advice my father gave me when I got married. Charles, he said. Charles, start out early, showing who's boss, he said. The best thing to do is to give an order, even if it don't make sense, just so she'll learn to obey. And he said, if anything about your wife irritates you, her conversation, or anything, just get up and leave the house. That'll teach her, he said. And he said, never, never let your wife know how much money you have. Never.
Mr. Webb, I don't think I could.
So, I took the opposite of my father's advice, and I've been happy ever since. And let that be a lesson to you, George, not to ask advice on personal matters. George, are you going to raise chickens on your farm?
What?
Are you going to raise chickens on your farm?
Uncle Luke's never been much interested, but I thought...
A book came into my office the other day on the phylum system of raising chickens. And I want you to read it. I've been thinking of beginning a small way in our backyard, and I'm going to put an incubator in the cellar.
Charles, are you talking about that old incubator again? I thought you two would be talking about things worthwhile.
Well, Myrtle, if you want to give the boy some good advice, I'll go upstairs and leave you alone with him.
George, Emily's got to come downstairs and eat her breakfast. She sends you her love, but she doesn't want to lay eyes on you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Well, Myrtle, I guess you don't know about that old superstition.
What do you mean, Charles?
Since the cavemen, no bridegroom should see his father-in-law on the day of the wedding, or near it. Now remember that.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Webb. Now, we'll have to interrupt again here. You see, we want to know how this all began. This wedding, this plan to spend a lifetime together. I'm awfully interested in how big things like that begin. You know how it is. You're 21 or 22, and you make some decisions, and then you're 70, and you've been a lawyer for 50 years. And that white-haired woman by your side has eaten over 50,000 meals with you. How do such things begin? George and Emily are going to show you now that conversation that they had when they first knew that, well, as the saying goes, they were meant for each other. But before they do, I want you to try and remember what it was like to have been very young, and particularly the days when you were first in love. When you were like a person sleepwalking. You didn't quite see which street you were in. You didn't quite hear everything that was said to you. You were just a little bit crazy. Will you remember that, please? Now, George and Emily will be coming out of high school at 3 o'clock. And George has just been elected president of the junior class. And as it's June, that means he'll be president of the senior class for all of next year. And Emily has just been elected secretary and treasurer. I don't have to tell you how important that is. Look, there they are, coming down Main Street now.
No, he really doesn't.
I can't, Louise. I've got to go home. Goodbye. Oh, Ernestine, can you come over tonight and do Latin? Isn't that Cicero the worst thing? Tell your mother you have to. Goodbye. Goodbye, Helen. Goodbye, Fred.
Can I carry your books home for you, Emily?
Well, thank you. It isn't far.
Excuse me, Emily. Say, Bob, if I'm a little late to practice, start anyway, and give Herb some long high ones.
Goodbye, Lizzie.
Goodbye, Lizzie. I'm awfully glad you were elected too, Emily.
Thank you.
Emily, why are you mad at me?
I'm not mad at you.
You've been treating me so funny lately.
Well, since you asked me, I might as well say it right out, George. Goodbye, Miss Corcoran.
Goodbye, Miss Corcoran. What is it?
I don't like the whole change that's come over you in the last year. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but I've got to tell the truth and shame the devil.
Change? What do you mean?
Well, up to a year ago, I used to like you a lot. And I used to watch you as you did everything, because we've been friends so long. But then, you began spending all your time at baseball. And you never stopped to speak to anybody anymore. Not even your own family you didn't. And George, it's a fact. You've got awful stuck up and conceited, and all the girls say so. They may not say it to your face, but that's what they say about you behind your back. And it hurts me to hear them say it. But I've got to agree with them a little. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but I can't be sorry I said it.
I'm glad you said it, Emily. I never thought that such a thing was happening to you. I guess it's hard for a fellow not to have faults creep into his character.
Well, I always expect a man to be perfect, and I think he should be.
Oh, I don't think it's possible to be perfect.
Well, my father is, and as far as I can see, your father is. There's no reason on earth why you shouldn't be too.
Well, I feel it's the other way around. That men aren't actually good, but girls are.
Well, you better know right now that I'm not perfect. It's not as easy for a girl to be perfect as a man, because we girls are more nervous. No, I'm sorry I said all that about you. I don't know what made me say it.
Emily!
Now I can see that it's not true at all, and I suddenly feel it isn't important anyway.
Emily, would you like to get some soda with me or something before we go home?
Well, thank you. I would.
Hello, Stu. How are you? Good afternoon, Miss Slocum. Hello, George. Hello, Emily. What do you have? Why, Emily Webb, what have you been crying about?
She just got an awful scare, Mr. Morgan. She almost got run over by the hardware store wagon. Everyone says that Tom Hawkins drives like a crazy man.
Here, you take a drink of water, Emily. You gotta be careful when you cross Main Street these days. It gets worse every year. What do you have?
I'll have a strawberry phosphate. Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
No, Emily. Have an ice cream soda with me.
2 strawberry ice cream sodas, Mr. Morgan. 2 strawberry ice cream sodas. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There are 125 horses in Grover's Corners this minute as I'm talking to you. State inspector was in here yesterday, and now they're bringing in all of these automobiles. The best thing to do is just stay home. Why, I can remember when a dog could go to sleep all day in the middle of Main Street, and nothing would come along to disturb her. There they are. Enjoy them. Yes, Mrs. Ellis, what can I do for you?
They're so expensive.
No, Emily. Don't think of that. We're celebrating our election. And do you know what else I'm celebrating?
No.
I'm celebrating because I got a friend who tells me all the things I ought to be told.
George, please don't think of that. I don't know what made me say it. It's not true.
No, Emily. You stick to it. I'm glad you spoke to me like you did. But you'll see. I'm going to change so quick. You bet I'm going to change. And, Emily, I want to ask you a favor.
What?
If I do end up going to State Agriculture College next year, would you write me a letter every once in a while?
I certainly will. I certainly will, George. It certainly seems being away for years, you get out of touch with things. Maybe letters from Grover's Corners wouldn't be so interesting after a while. Grover's Corners isn't a very important place when you think of all New Hampshire, but I think it's a very nice town.
The day wouldn't come when I wouldn't want to know everything that's happening here. And I know that's true.
Well, I'll try and make my letters interesting.
You know, Emily, whenever I meet a farmer, I ask him if it's important to go to state agriculture school to be a good farmer.
Why, George?
And some even say it's a waste of time. I mean, you can get all that stuff out of the pamphlets the government sends out anyways. And Uncle Luke's getting old. He's about ready to be taking over his farm tomorrow if I could.
My.
And like you say, in other places, meeting other people, gosh, if it's anything like that, I don't want to go away. I guess new people aren't any better than the old ones. I bet they almost never are. Emily, I feel like you're as good of a friend as I got. I don't need to go to other places and meet other people.
But, George, maybe it's really important for you to go and learn all about that. Cattle judging and soil and those things. Of course, I don't know.
Emily, I'm going to make up my mind right now. I won't go, and I'll tell Paul about it tonight.
But George, I don't see why you have to decide right now. It's a whole year away.
Emily, I'm glad you told me about that. That fault in my character. What you said was right, but there was one thing wrong with it. And that was when you said that for a year I wasn't noticing people. And you, for instance. Why? You said you were watching me everything I did. I was doing the same for you all the time. Why, sure, you were always one of the chief people I thought about. I always made sure you were sitting on the bleachers and who you were with. And for 3 days now, I've been trying to walk home with you. But something's always gotten in the way. Yesterday, I was standing against the wall waiting for you, and you walked home in this corker.
Why, George, life's awful funny. How could I have known that? Why,
Emily, I'm going to tell you why I'm not going to stay agriculture school. I feel that once you found someone you're very fond of, someone who's fond of you too, and likes you enough to be interested in your character, well, I feel like that's just as important as college is, and even more so. That's what I think.
I think it's awfully important too.
Emily?
Yes, George?
Emily, if I do improve, make a big change, could you be? Would you be?
I am now. I always have been.
I guess this is an important talk we've been having.
Yes. Yes.
Wait just a minute and I'll walk you home. Mr. Morgan, I'll have to run home and get the money to pay you for this. It'll only take me a minute.
Why, George Gibbs, you don't mean to tell me that...
Yes, but I have my reasons. Look, here's my gold watch to keep until I go back.
That's all right, George. Keep your watch. I'll trust you.
I'll be back in 5 minutes.
I'll trust you 10 years, George. Not a day over. Got over your shock, Emily?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Morgan. It was nothing.
I'm ready.
Well, now it's time to get on with the wedding. There's a lot to be said about a wedding. There are a lot of things that happen during the wedding. Naturally, we couldn't put them all into one wedding, especially not a wedding in Grover's Corners, where they're awful plain and short. In this wedding, I play the minister. That gives me the right to say a few more things about it. For a while now, the play gets pretty serious. You see, some churches say that marriage is a sacrament. I don't quite know what that means, but I can guess. It's like Mrs. Gibbs said a few minutes ago. People were made to go through life 2 by 2. Now, this is a good wedding, but people are so put together nowadays that even at a good wedding, there's a lot of confusion way down deep in people's minds. And we thought that ought to be in our play too. And the real hero of the scene isn't on stage at all. And you know who that is. It's like what one of those Middle West fellas said. Every child born into the world is nature's attempt to make a perfect human being. Well, we've seen nature pushing and contriving for some time now, And we know she's interested in quantity. But I think she's interested in quality too. That's why I'm in the ministry. And don't forget, all the other witnesses of the scene. The ancestors, millions of them. Most of them set out to live life 2 by 2 also. Millions of them. Well, that's all my sermon. It wasn't very long anyway.
Oh, I don't know why I should be crying. I suppose there's nothing to cry about. It came over me at breakfast this morning. There was Emily, eating her breakfast as she's done for 17 years. Now she's off to do it in someone else's house. I suppose that's it. Oh, I've got to say it, you know. There's something downright cruel about sending our girls into marriage this way. I hope her girlfriends have told her a thing or two. It's cruel, I know, but I couldn't get myself to say anything. I went into marriage blind as a bat myself. The whole world's wrong, that's what's the matter. Oh look, there they come.
Hey, George! What's going on, George? Look at him, fellas. He's scared. George, don't look so innocent no more, you geezer.
You know what you're thinking, don't just raise the T-shaped boy.
Hey, George!
All right, that's enough of that. There used to be an awful lot more of that kind of thing at weddings, Rome and later. We're more civilized now, so they say.
George, what's wrong?
Ma, I don't want to grow old. Why is everyone pushing me so?
Why, George, you wanted it.
No, Ma, listen to me.
George, no, you're a man now.
Listen, Ma, for the last time I ask you, all I want to be is a fella.
George, if anyone should hear you, why, I'm ashamed of you.
Where's Emily?
George, you gave me such a turn.
Cheer up, Ma, I'm getting married.
Let me catch my breath a minute.
Now, Ma, you save Thursday nights. Emily and I are coming over every Thursday night. You'll see. Oh, Ma, what are you crying for? Come on, we gotta get ready for this.
I've never felt so alone in my whole life. And George, over there, looking so... I hate him. I wish I were dead. Papa?
Emily, now don't get upset.
But Papa, I don't want to get married.
Shh, Emily, everything's all right.
Why can't I stay just the way I am for a little while? Let's go away.
No, Emily. Now stop and think a minute.
But don't you remember? You used to say all the time, you used to say that I was your girl. There must be lots of places we can go. I'll work for you. I'll keep house.
You mustn't think of such things. You're just nervous, Emily. George, will you come here? Why, you're marrying the best young fella in the world. George is a fine fellow.
But Papa...
I'm giving away my daughter, George. Do you think you can take care of her?
Mr. Webb, I want to try. Emily, I'm gonna do my best for you. I love you. I need you.
Well, if you love me, help me. All I want is for someone to love me.
I will, Emily. I will try.
And I mean forever, do you hear? Forever and ever.
Now come, they're waiting for us. Now, you know it'll be alright.
you, George, take this woman, Emily, to be your wedded wife, to have...
Perfectly lovely wedding! Loveliest wedding I ever saw. Oh, I do love a good wedding, don't you? Isn't she a lovely bride?
I do. Do you, Emily, take this man, George, to be your wedded husband?
Don't know when I've seen such a lovely wedding before. But I always cry. Don't know why it is, but I always cry. I just like to see the young people happy, don't you? Oh, I think it's lovely.
I've married over 200 couples in my day. Do I believe in it? I don't know. John marries Sally, millions of them. The cottage, the go-kart, the Sunday afternoon drives to the Ford, the first rheumatism, the grandchildren, the second rheumatism, the deathbed, the reading of the will. Once in 1,000 times, it's interesting. Well, let's have Mendelssohn's Wedding March.
Aren't they a lovely couple? Oh, I've never been to such a nice wedding. I know they'll be happy. I always say, happiness, that's the great thing. The important thing is to be happy.
That's the end of the second act, folks. 10 minutes intermission.